In this video, you guys are going to learn how to play the Petrov Defense with the black pieces. It is one of the most solid opening to play with the black pieces, and there are no gambits that can white play in this particular opening against the Petrov Defense. It is an opening that has been played by top Grandmasters even in the World Championship match against Magnus Carlsen, the master of the Petrov Defense, Nepomniachtchi. So by the end of the video, you guys are going to have a solid repertoire to play with the black pieces, the Petrov Defense, and you guys are going to thank me a lot. So if you will love this particular video, make sure you can subscribe, and I don't want to waste any further time, so let's jump into the video. So white starts with 1 e4, we play the move e5, and white plays the move knight to f3, simply attacking the pawn on e5. So usually black continues the game by playing the move knight to c6, simply protecting the pawn. But instead, like after knight c6, there are already many gambits. White can even play d4 takes bishop c4. So we don't really want to go in these types of gambits. We are going to play the move knight to f6. What is the idea? So kind of a symmetrical structure, and we are kind of allowing our opponent to take on e5. So first of all, if the opponent simply captures the pawn on e5, this is the main move we are going to discuss today. So first of all, the most natural way for black to continue the game is to simply take the pawn on e4. But after knight into e4, white can already play the move queen to e2, attacking the knight. And the point here is, if we try to move our knight back, white is already winning on the spot with knight to c6. It's a check, and we are losing the queen. So that is why moving the knight back is already a blunder. So if we try to play queen to e7, this is also a move that can be played, re-attacking the white's knight. It will capture the knight, and we can play the move d6, attacking the knight. The knight cannot move because the queen is hanging. But here white can simply play the move d4, and after takes, the white is simply a pawn up, and white is, to be true, pretty comfortable in this particular position. So that is why instead of knight e4, we are going to play the main move, which is to play the move d6, first kicking away the knight from the e5 square. The knight goes back, and now knight into e4. So this is the main position where there are many variations that can be discussed, and we are going to focus on the 4 main variations, which is knight to c3, d3, d4, and queen to e2. These 4 are the main move and the most human possible move. So first, discussing with what happens if white simply plays the move queen e2, attacking the knight. We cannot move the knight because the king is attacked. So the only move for black is to play the move queen e7, because if you play something else like d5, protecting the knight, white can already push the pawn, and we are already losing the knight. So that is why queen e7 is the only move. And this is kind of a harmless line for black. White can play d3, we can simply come back, and now bishop to g5. If white tries to trade off the queen, we are like having no worries in this position. We can simply short castle up, and we are pretty fine. It's a symmetrical position, and we are doing perfectly fine. So that is why queen e7 doesn't make any sense. White can try to play bishop g5, but now we can already trade off the queen, and we can simply play the bishop. And you will see like nothing much is happening up. It's a solid position for black, no particular weaknesses in our camp. And like after bishop e7 short castle, we can also short castle in the position, and white can play c4. If white tries to play something like d4, you can also continue with d5, h6, c6, and black is absolutely fine. So the only move that makes the game even more interesting is c4. Trying to make something interesting, we can play the move h6 now, kicking the bishop back. If white tries to capture the knight, we are already pretty happy. We are having the bishop pair, we are having a strong bishop, and black is already the one who is trying to play for the win. So bishop goes back, we can develop our knight to c6, knight c3, and already g5 is a very strong move. Why? Because we have already traded off the queen, so there is no possible reason for white to attack our king, so we can already expand on the king side. Bishop goes back, and already knight h5, with the idea of even going f5, f4, and black is already the one who is playing for the win, you see. So whenever you have traded off the queen, you can already expand on the king side. There is absolutely no problem, because the opponent can never attack your king because the queens are off the board. So going back, that's exactly what's happened if your opponent plays the move queen to e2. Now discussing the move, what happens if white plays the move d3, attacking the knight. We simply come back, bishop to e2, and now d5. Why? We can also put our bishop to e7, but I believe first covering the center makes much more sense. And now we can put our bishop to d6, which is a better square rather than e7, because it covers more squares, right? c4, which makes the thing even more interesting. If white plays something like d4, we are absolutely fine. Short castle, you can put your bishop to f5, you can play c6, you can put your knight to d7, put your queen to c7, and you're absolutely fine. So that is why c4 is the only move that makes the game even more interesting. And now we are going to play the move knight to c6. If you try to play d4, the opponent can capture the pawn, and the point here is, after bishop h2, king h2, queen takes knight, the material wise the position is even, but you will see white is having a strong center. We are not having the center. Definitely the white king is a bit weak, but it is not really going to affect the white position. White's position is very beautiful. All the pieces are coming out and white is already better. So that is the reason we are not playing d4, but instead we are playing knight to c6, focusing on our development. And now knight to c3. If white tries to play bishop g5, first developing the bishop, we can already push our pawn. First of all, stopping this knight coming to c3, and now the bishop on e2 is already bad. The knight cannot capture the pawn because the knight is defending the pawn. That's the reason we have played knight to c6. And black is absolutely fine. We can continue with short castle, h6, bishop f5, and we are perfectly fine. So that's exactly what happens if bishop g5. If white develops the knight, attacking this pawn on d5, we can already push our pawn to d4 now, attacking the knight. The knight goes to b5, and now we can already castle out. Our position is absolutely fine. So if white tries to capture the pawn on d4, now we can already take on d4. Knight takes on d4, and now already bishop into h2 is a good move. Because in this particular position, there is no knight on b1. So white cannot play bishop e3 because first of all the b2 pawn is hanging. And like the pieces are less, black can already continue the game with bishop f5, rook d8, and we are pretty happy. Absolutely no problem in this position because the pieces are less on the board. That's why we have gone into this particular variation. So now going back a bit, if white tries to capture the bishop on d6 and saying now white is having the bishop pair advantage, it's not really working because we are once again absolutely fine. We are having more space in the center. The bishop on e2 is bad. We can develop our bishop, we can get our rooks into the game, we can put our knight over here, we can even push c5. We are absolutely fine. There is not a single problem in this particular position. So going back, that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays d3. Discussing what happens if your opponent plays knight to c3. We can take off the knight, takes, and now bishop to e7. Our idea is to simply castle as soon as possible. Opponent plays bishop e3. So if first of all, if white does the same with bishop d3 short castle, once again, absolutely no problem. You can simply short castle. You can develop your knight to d7, putting your knight to f6. You can even push the same thing like d5, c6, bishop d6, bishop g4. Absolutely same step. Nothing is happening. The only thing that makes the game even more interesting is bishop e3. We castle up and white goes for doing a long castle. So basically now white's idea is to attack on our king side, though it's not really going to work. We play knight to d7 because we are going to put our knight to f6. Because the knight on f6 always defends the king. So you must remember this idea. The knight goes to f6. So after knight f6, white tries to play bishop d3 with the idea of maybe expanding on the king side. There is nothing to worry about in this position. We can already play the move d5. Trying to grab space in the center. White tries to play h3 with the idea of g4. We can play c6. Making our position even more solid. g4, it looks like white is trying to attack our king, but nothing is happening. We can simply put our knight to e4. We are attacking the queen, so bishop has to capture the knight. If white tries to move the queen in this particular position, we can even go back with the knight and we can simply capture this bishop because this bishop is a very good bishop that is attacking our king. So we can just simply take off this bishop and there's nothing happening in this particular position. So if the bishop tries to capture the knight, we can already take this knight, take the bishop, the knight goes to d4, and we can play the move rook e8. Rook g1, it looks like white is still trying to attack our king, though it's not really going to work once again. Queen d5. King to g1, king to b1, and now bishop to d7. So basically we are focusing on developing our pieces. It looks like white is going to attack, but the attack is never going to come. h4, rook d8, g5, c5. Finally, the knight goes back, takes, and now bishop c6. And you can already understand now black is the one having the bishop pair, more space in the center, and the time that white used to put his pawns on the king side is simply useless. It's simply useless, and now these pawns are going to become the weaknesses in the future. So you see, this is how you can easily continue the position without any stress. So going back, that's exactly what happens with the knight to c3. Now coming to the main move, which is d4. This is the fun part. After d4, we are going to play the move d5, not allowing our opponent to gain more space in the center with d5. So we are going to play the move d5, protecting the knight. And now white is having the two main moves. White can even play c4, attacking the center, or white can simply develop the bishop. So first, discussing what happens if white plays the move c4, attacking in the center. We can already develop our bishop by giving a check. The knight goes to d2. The knight cannot go to c3 because after takes, we are already winning an exchange. That is why knight to d2. Now we can simply short castle up. And now, if white tries to capture the pawn on d5, we can simply capture with the queen. And this is absolutely fine position. Bishop c4 is not going to work because we can simply capture the bishop, because the knight cannot capture the queen because the knight is pinned. Okay, so bishop d3 is the move that makes sense. Trying to castle as soon as possible because the king is in the center. We can develop our bishop, pinning up this particular knight. Particularly this particular knight. And now short castle by white, and now it's already better for black because after we can simply trade on d2. The knight cannot take with the knight because the queen is hanging. So bishop takes. You have this particular position. White's king is weak. White is having an isolated pawn. Black is having a perfect position with no particular weakness. We can play c6, put our knight to f6 with absolutely no problem, and black is good to go playing for the win here. So you see, that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays c4. Absolutely no problem. Discussing the main move, which is bishop to d3, bishop to d6. This particular line has been played in the centuries by the top grandmasters. Short castle, and now c4. Now striking in the center. We cannot capture the pawn because our knight is hanging. So we are going to play the move first c6, defending the pawn. White plays rook e1, attacking the knight 2 times. We play the move bishop f5, simply defending the knight. And now white plays the move queen b3, which is very logical. White is attacking the pawn on d5, and white is also attacking the pawn on b7. So here we are going to play the move queen to d7. What is the idea? We are simply defending this particular pawn. And if white tries to go for capturing the d5 pawn, it's not really going to work, because now we are having bishop h2 tricks. It's a check, the king have to capture, or the knight can capture it. But even though white is losing the queen and you are winning the game on the spot. So that's exactly what happens if the opponent captures the pawn on d5, being a bit greedy. Instead, white can continue the game via knight c3, adding more pressure. Though nothing is happening now, you can simply take on c3. How? What is happening? It looks like a bit complicated position to the beginners. Though nothing is happening, let me simplify it for you. So after knight c3, white is having two main options. White can go for capturing the knight, or white can go for capturing the bishop. So first, starting with, if white goes for capturing the knight, nothing is happening, you can take on d3, and you can simply take on c4, and you will see white is having a weak pawn. You can develop your knight to a6, putting your knight to c7 and d5 with absolutely no problem. Once again, you are in the driver's seat, you are playing for the win, because black is your opponent is having the weakness, you are having none of the weaknesses in your particular position. So going back, queen c3 is already not the best way to continue. The best way is to take the bishop. Our queen is attacked, so we have to capture the bishop. And now once again, white is having two ways. White can go for capturing the knight, or white can go for capturing the b7 pawn, which attacks the rook. So first of all, if opponent goes for capturing the knight in this position, we can already play something like b6. If he captures with the queen, we can already capture the pawn, because opponent is now already having a weak pawn. But if the opponent captures with the b pawn, our pawn is attacked, so we have to push our pawn. And once again, the position is absolutely fine. After takes, we can already take with the c pawn. The knight is jumping to c6 with on a5, attacking the queen. The c3 pawn is weak for white, and black is having a perfectly fine position. So going back, instead of capturing the knight, if white goes for capturing the pawn, which looks the most tempting option that attacks the rook, now black is having a very strong move in the position. So you see, our knight and the rook is attacked. So first of all, if we try to move our knight back, we are simply losing the rook. So now here white would be 3 points up. So instead, we are going to simply play the move queen to d7, pulling back the queen. What is happening? So first of all, if white tries to capture the rook in this position, we can already pull our knight back to a4 with the idea of playing the move knight to b6, and the queen is trapped. That's it. The queen is gone. So if white can try to play c5, attacking the bishop and also covering the square, but still we can play the move knight a6, and this also traps the queen, and we are winning the queen with a completely winning position. That is why queen into 8 is already a blunder. White have to forcefully capture the queen and have to take the knight. So after white takes the knight, we can already take the pawn with absolutely no problems. The material is even and the game can head into a draw. Maybe we can put our knight to d5, adding the pressure on the pawn on c3, though the possession is equal, and maybe the game would end in a draw. So going back, if after knight d7, if white tries to push the pawn, attacking the bishop and the knight, now we can simply sacrifice the bishop and we can pull our knight back, because the knight is much stronger than the bishop here, and now we are having the knight pair. It's a block position you see in the center. So knights are always stronger in the close position. It is a perfectly fine position to play with the black pieces. We can even push our pawn, doing a minority attack, create a weakness, and simply attack the pawn. So once again, black is the one in the driver's seat with absolutely no problem. So this is how you can play the Petrov Defense opening. So basically, I have given you a complete overview of how to play the Petrov Defense. You play knight f6. From this particular move and moment, the real Petrov begins. There are multiple variations where we have covered each of lines in particular detail, and I'm pretty sure and I'm pretty confident that I've covered every particular aspect that can land in your particular game. So I hope that you have learned something from this video and must check it out. Play this particular opening in your games and you're definitely going to see some good result. It is a very solid opening to play with the black pieces. So must try it. Even like this particular opening have been played in the World Championship match, and it is a very solid opening, believe me. So must try it. So yeah, if you love this video, love this particular opening, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you're new to our channel. And if you want any particular video on any particular topic, on any particular opening or middle game, make sure to tell me in the comments below and I'm going to come up with that particular video on. So thank you for watching and I'm going to see you soon. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Oneshot Chess. Bye bye.